Welcome to This Week in Thoughtful 2, the second installment of my shameless attempt to leech off Sargon of Akkad's fame. Welcome to This Week in Thoughtful 2, the second installment of my critique of Sargon of Akkad's work. This time we are going to be talking about the connection between Jews and Zionism, and whether it is anti-Semitic to be an anti-Zionist. In his latest This Week in Stupid, Sargon was hovering around this question, and admitted he lacked knowledge. I am an Israeli, so I'll do my best to clear up the subject. The issue Sargon is discussing is anti-Semitism in the UK Labour Party, specifically Ken Livingstone's comment this week about the connection between Nazis and Zionists in the 1930s, and his claim that Hitler initially wanted to expel Germany's Jews to Israel. Sargon has this to say about it.
Now, I just want to take this point to stress that I don't think that saying Hitler was a Zionist is anti-Semitic. Zionism is not Jews, and not all Jews are Zionists. So it's not the same thing, it's an ideology. I'm just saying it's really fucking stupid to have done this, Ken. Aside from the fact that obviously Israel didn't exist then, trying to persuade people that Hitler was a Zionist is going to be very difficult because, like with feminists and women, Zionists have been very keen to make Zionism synonymous with Jews.
Alright, let's begin by talking about what Zionism is. Zionism is a movement that started in the 19th century to fight for the national rights of the Jews. Zionism claims that just like every other nation, the Jewish nation has the right to sovereignty in its homeland. There are different interpretations of what that means, but all Zionists will agree that this is the basis. And Zionism has been a very successful movement, fully achieving its goals and establishing a Jewish state in the homeland of the Jews, although we still have to fight for it. Most Israelis would have liked to move on from Zionism already, but unfortunately there's still a large part of the world that does not recognize our rights, so Zionism lives on. Another movement that began in the 19th century was anti-Semitism. Now, hatred of Jews, of course, existed for millennia, but it was mostly for religious reasons. Anti-Semitism is something else. It is a conspiracy theory that claims that Jews are controlling the world from behind the scenes and are sowing chaos as part of the plan to one day take over entirely. The anti-Semites generally don't believe that all Jews are in on the conspiracy, but they do blame the Jewish culture for being a breeding ground for it. And the anti-Semites would often use the term Zionism to define that cabal of Jews that are running the conspiracy, and claim that this is what Zionism actually is. You may have noticed that the anti-Semite portrayal of Zionism is very close to what we perceive in today's Islamism, an ideology that wants to take over the world and takes its power from the culture that bore it. There is one big difference though. Islamists who want to take over the world actually do exist. We know who they are, we know their names, and they openly declare that their goal is to establish a caliphate all over the world and that they are taking that idea from Islam. Jews who want to rule the world, on the other hand, exist nowhere outside the mythology created by the anti-Semites. There are no Jewish texts that express such a motivation, except fabrications made by anti-Semites, and there are no Jews who declare such aspirations. Because of that, when the Nazis set about to save the world from the Jewish conspiracy, they had no way of telling the good Jews from the bad Jews, and the solution was to just kill them all. This is why anti-Semitism is so dangerous. After the Holocaust, it was no longer popular to hate Jews, and anti-Semites had to mask their hate. Their solution was to say that they are against Zionism, not against Jews. But they are still talking about the same thing. They still define Zionism as a cabal of Jews that conspires against the world. So if someone says he's an anti-Zionist, you have to listen carefully to what he really means. He could be an anti-Semite. Another group of people who use the term anti-Zionist to cloak their racism are those who deny Israel's right to exist and the national rights of the Jews. They will make it seem like they are merely opposing Israel's actions, but if you let them talk long enough, you will realize that what they really oppose is the very existence of Israel. The BDS movement is mostly made of people of that sort. This is another form of anti-Zionism that is actually racism. But there's another side to it. There is also the Israeli far right, which has its own ideas about Zionism. For instance, there are right-wing Zionists who interpret the idea of a Jewish state as a state in which Jews have more right than non-Jews, or those who believe Zionism will have achieved its goals only after Israel returns to its historic borders, which include the West Bank. The actions of those Zionists invite legitimate criticism, but Israeli right-wing politicians will often use the label of anti-Semite to silence those critics and deflect the criticism. So, as Sargon correctly mentions, these Zionists are behaving just like regressive feminists, equating disagreeing with Zionism to hating Jews. Because of their actions, there are also many people in the world who have come to view Zionism as a racist and imperialist movement, and call themselves anti-Zionists even though they do believe in Israel's right to exist. These anti-Zionists are not anti-Semites. In conclusion, not everyone who is critical of Israel and gets called an anti-Semite is actually an anti-Semite, and not everyone who calls himself an anti-Zionist is an anti-Semite. But they quite often are, so you have to listen to what's behind the anti-Zionism before you pass judgment. Now as for the claim that Hitler was a Zionist, Hitler basically wanted to get rid of the Jews, and if deporting them to Israel was the best way to do so, he would have. But that doesn't make him a Zionist. Wanting to get rid of the Jews is not the same as wanting to give them their rights. It is true that Zionists negotiated with the Nazi regime about bringing Germany's Jews to Israel, but there's nothing wrong with that. To this day, whenever things get rough for a Jewish community anywhere in the world, the State of Israel sees it as its duty to rescue them and bring them to Israel. Often it is done with the cooperation of the local dictatorial government, which is usually very happy to oblige. It sounds terrible today that Jews had contacts with the Nazi regime, but we have to remember that in the 1930s the Nazis did not mass murder anyone yet. They were just another racist dictatorship. When those contacts are being brought up nowadays, it is usually by anti-Semites who wish to discredit the Zionist movement, and that is why Jews are so triggered by what Ken Livingstone has said. Whenever someone brings up this issue, you've got to wonder what their motivation is. Anyway, that is basically the picture of the relation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. I hope I made the matter clearer.